We get a lot of people that ask us about using shielded versus unshielded cable as far as the Ethernet cable for our Matrix and our Hearback Pro and our Octo systems. And the easiest way to explain this is, let's first talk about audio cabling before we talk about the Ethernet cabling. With audio cabling, whether it is an XLR or a 1/4 inch line level, you typically want to have shielded cable there. Now for some of you that do a lot of wiring in like installation studios, things like that, you're probably well aware that when you go from one piece of equipment to another, it's common practice to actually lift the ground on one of those. Usually most people will adopt like, having it grounded at the source but always lifting it at the destination, and that is to avoid a ground loop between different pieces of equipment. The shield is really there to grab any RF signal or induced signal that is coming into that audio wire and to drain it off to ground. Well, it doesn't really need to actually be connected at both ends for that to work. It just needs a path to ground. And having it connected at both ends ends up causing more problems, so that's why it's common practice for it to be lifted at one end, but it still serves the purpose of draining that noise to ground. That being said, the Ethernet is very similar to that. You can have shielding, but you don't want the shielding to go all the way to the end device because, again, just the same way, it can induce a ground loop and cause noise on the audio. It's a common practice in a lot of installations where in the wiring that's in the wall, that cabling will be shielded, and the shield can be connected at the source, but at the destination, like the Matrix or the Hearback Pro or the Octo, you don't want that shield to connect to the device because then you can actually introduce noise. Of course, some people say, well, not having the shield, does that not possibly induce noise by not having the shielding there? The answer is no, and the reason is because the signal that's coming across the Ethernet cabling is digital. It's not analog audio, so you don't really have the possibility of noise getting into the signal. Also, when that signal comes into the unit, it's actually completely isolated from the rest of the circuitry. The power comes in, it goes into a power supply that is an isolated design, so that power is not actually the same power that's going to the rest of the circuitry. It's completely isolated. So the best practice is either to use an unshielded cable from our hub or network switch to the device, or if it's an installation, you can use shielded cabling in the walls, but that last leg, that last cable that goes from the wall plate to the device should be an unshielded cable. A problem that you may run into if you attempt to use shielded cable the entire way from the hub or network switch to the device is when you go to plug that device in, it actually can induce a charge across the shield back to the hub or the network switch, and it can actually glitch the PoE circuitry, causing a power outage to all the other PoE devices that are currently connected. So one thing that you'd see is when you plugged in your device, you might see all the other ones temporarily power off and reboot. To avoid that, it's best to use an unshielded cable.